Did you know the first Minnesotan killed in the Vietnam War was from both Moorhead and Grand Forks? Bob Larson, a 1951 graduate of Oak Grove Lutheran School in Fargo, died in the first U.S. Air Force plane crash in South Vietnam. Hi, this is Tracy Briggs, and welcome to this special episode of Back Then. The podcast is brought to us this week by Discover Jamestown. To learn more, go to discoverjamestownnd.com. I say special because normally I do this podcast every Wednesday and we talk about all kinds of things with history, but this is special because on Sunday, September 11th, for the first time in the history of Veterans Honor Flight of North Dakota, Minnesota, the majority of the veterans going on the trip to Washington, D.C. are those that served during the Vietnam era. And I'm lucky enough to go on this trip and fly with the group. So I will be doing reports for Inform from September 11th through the 13th. But for the next couple of days, to mark the flight's transition to serving mostly Vietnam veterans, we wanted to take a closer look at the very first soldiers from Minnesota and North Dakota who were killed in the Vietnam War. Today, it's a story about a Minnesota Air Force captain who was also Grand Forks to the core. With a tilt of his head and a shy smile, Bob Larson looks back from the second row of the weathered old basketball team photo. Standing about a foot shorter than some on the team, Larson was by no means the star of that 1950 Grand Forks Central High squad. However, years later, he would stand out for another reason, a tragic one. He would become the first Minnesotan killed in the Vietnam War. Larson was one of 3 U.S. Air Force officers killed when their Fairchild C-123 Provider became the first U.S. Air Force plane to be lost in Vietnam. It happened on February 2, 1962, during the earliest days of what would become one of America's longest wars. Despite Larson's story being dramatic and noteworthy, many were unaware of his ties to our region, which included carefree days on the basketball court in the northern Red River Valley. Bob Fallows was a year behind Larson at Grand Forks Central. He played on the B squad in 1950, while Larson suited up with the varsity squad. But even 72 years later, Fallows remembers good old number 46. He says, "We weren't close friends or anything, but I definitely remember him. I remember him being a nice, pretty easygoing guy." He doesn't recall Larson getting a lot of playing time, but that didn't stop him from putting in the work. Fallows says he was kind of a Y rat, referring to those teenagers who spent their days and nights practicing at the YMCA. However, Larson wouldn't get to play ball again with his Central teammates. Right after his junior year in 1950, his family moved to Moorhead, Minnesota. Just the year before, his older brother Clarence had become president of Oak Grove Lutheran School in Fargo. It was decided that younger brother Bob would finish his education there. He and his mother, Anna, moved in with another brother, Elmer, who was an insurance agent who lived at 802 14th Street North in Moorhead. Larson seemed to embrace being the new kid at school, playing football, acting in the school play, working on the yearbook, and even picking up where he left off at Central, joining the Grover varsity basketball team. He was also part of the Edda Society, which seems to be something similar to a speech club. Larson seemed to do it all, and his adventures were about to get even bigger. Following graduation from Oak Grove, Larson enlisted in the Air Force from Clay County, eventually working his way up to the rank of captain. He got married to a woman from Tennessee, and the couple had 3 children. By 1955, 4 years after Larson graduated from Oak Grove, America's involvement in Vietnam escalated. By early 1962, Captain Larson and his aircraft were assigned to Operation Ranch Hand, an effort to expose the roads and trails used by the Viet Cong by dumping an estimated 19 million gallons of defoliating herbicides over 10 to 20% of Vietnam and parts of Laos. The project started with Larson's group in 1962 and carried on until 1971. The herbicide they used most often came to be known as Agent Orange. so named for the color of the containers it came from. Of course, in later years, Agent Orange became highly controversial because of its long-term ecological impacts and the sometimes very serious impacts it had on the health of the soldiers who had been exposed to it. Few details are known of that crash on February 2nd, 1962. Larson's record on the site honorstates.org says his death was recorded as, quote, died through hostile action, air crash on land, incident location, South Vietnam, Bien Ho Province, end quote. For his service, Larson's family received several medals, including a Purple Heart for him. The bodies of Larson and his fellow officers were recovered. He was buried in North Carolina. According to a 1973 story from the Forum, his young family, including an infant son he had never met, resettled in California. The fact that a man, Larson, who was so tied to the Grand Forks and Fargo-Moorhead region, was the very first of the more than 1,000 Minnesotans killed in the Vietnam War, doesn't appear to be common knowledge here. Everyone we spoke to, from former teammates to school officials, were surprised at the sad news. We only discovered the fact after stumbling upon an old newspaper clipping in the Forum archives. But now that Larson's loss is known, maybe those who now walk the same high school hallways at Grand Forks Central or Oak Grove Lutheran, or even walk the streets of North Moorhead where he once lived, might give a thought to the nice, easygoing kid who loved basketball and sacrificed all. Tomorrow, a closer look at the first North Dakotan to die in the Vietnam War, including a nearly 50-year-old visit with his grieving parents. Again, tune into our stories from Honor Flight in Washington, D.C., September 11th through the 13th, 2022. Those can be found on inform.com and other Forum Communications properties. Thanks once again to Discover Jamestown for sponsoring this podcast. For more information, go to discoverjamestownd.com. Forum Communications is proud to be part of The Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org.